What's up, BRC? I'm excited to be back with another lesson. We're going to look at a few things that are going to be happening in the warm-up pen. I want to talk about warm-up pen etiquette and riding around in the warm-up pen. Now, in the show jumping world, when I play around there, they have very clear-cut rules for the warm-up pen, which I wish barrel racing did, but they don't. So when you go to a jackpot, every single person is going to be going kind of their own way. What I advise is, if you have a really solid horse that lopes around really nice and gentle, go outside, do your thing with the group. If you have a horse or you're a person that needs to be a little bit more focused to be able to make your run, you're a little bit more green or novice about being able to stay really focused, then getting away from that place that's pretty chaotic will always help you. So go out on your own, find a little grass spot where you can long trot a little bit on your own. I always advise getting on just 10 to 15 minutes prior to your run and not doing a lot of hanging out with other horses. The reason you don't want to hang out with a lot of other horses is once your horse gets tired of doing its job, it'll always want to go back to the herd. And if you have it do its job enough and wear it out and really use up those brain cells of doing all this competing and doing all these things, and it always goes back to a resting place around your friends with your horseback, it's going to start to develop a little bit of herd-bound issues or going up the alleyway issues. So hanging out by yourself, or at least stepping off of your horse, loosening the cinch in between the time you warm up and the time that you actually run and the time after you run is a really great idea. I don't ever advise sitting on your horse long after you run. I like to let them know that their job is complete. So now that we've gone over a few of the basics, let's look at what we want to do while we're warming up. I never suggest a longer warm-up than 5 minutes unless you know that you have a really naughty horse. If your horse is being really naughty, which I pulled up Mojo, he is totally fresh, has not been lunged or conditioned, and he is going to be kind of a little bit of a weenie today about wanting to do all the right things in the right order. He is 4 years old. He tends to be a little bit on the hot side. I'm going to show you what it looks like and what I'm going to do to keep his feet moving. Most of the time, we all just want a recipe book about going in there, loping circles, and thinking that if we do the same thing every time, that will provide a consistent place for our horse. Instead, I want you to be a technician. I want you to really think about what it is that your horse needs that day. Is your horse fresh that day, or is your horse exponentially more tired than it typically is? Is your horse exponentially more hyper than it normally is? Has your horse had a lot of time off? Was your horse coming off an injury? Is your horse not focused? Is your horse laser focused? So all of those things are going to determine exactly how we warm this horse up. A really laser focused horse, I'm going to saddle a few minutes before, and I'm going to do light walking for 6 to 8 minutes before I warm up. A horse that needs more focus, like this one, I'll go through the warm up with you right now. But the key is always making their feet move until we feel like we've really got them all zoned in. My really, really hot horses, I advise doing the laser focused warm up. The reason is, a hot horse and a laser-focused horse have a lot of the same things. They know what they want, and they're not able to do it right now. So when you take a really, really hot horse and you rev the engine in the warm-up pen by loping it around or trotting it around, you get in a mental argument with that animal. As you're mentally arguing, you're losing confidence toward what you're actually going to do in the run if in the warm-up you feel totally out of control. A hot horse is kind of this way. The more that we gas it up a little bit, the harder it is to turn the motor off. So instead of turning the motor on and then trying to control it, it's best to leave yourself in neutral until you're ready to make that run. Walking is a beautiful way to warm up a horse. It provides a slow, steady warm up and can help prevent a lot of injuries. I walk baby Flo until she is sweaty before I run, which means about 6 to 8 minutes. So treat your laser focused horses the same as your hot horses. Your busy-minded horses that are pretty broke and should ride around really nicely, let's keep their feet busy. I'll show you that now. Okay, so as I get started here on Mojo, you're gonna see that he's carrying his head really high. And one thing about him carrying his head high is you don't see me fighting to pull down to my knees. You don't see me pulling way down in my lap to get him to make his head lower. What I'm actually gonna do is make his feet move around and ask him to do some tasks. You can see the way that he's shaking his tail, he's prancing around, he's carrying his head really high, that this guy is not having a super laser focused day. So I figured that this was what most of you guys experience, so I would leave it in here so we could make a lesson out of it. As I ask him to lope around, you can see him being really humpy or really fresh. And again, I'm not pulling his head down where my hands are in my lap. I'm actually instead meeting his head with my hands. So I'm a little higher up here with my hands A lot of you guys want to pull down. That can actually create a lot of tension between the two of you. So you can see I went from a really teeny tiny circle down to a really big circle where I've got this spiral coming in. And every single time that I feel him getting a little strung out or a little ahead of himself, I'm asking him to lope in a small circle. Now, he switched leads here on me, so I'm going to go ahead and trot him down and then make him pick up his correct lead. A horse that's not behaving really well is going to swap around leads in the back, in the front. They're going to do things all sorts of naughty. But I have to tell you, the thing that you should focus on here is speed and not direction. What we want to do is we want to focus more on the speed that he's going and not necessarily the lead that he's on. This may seem counterintuitive, but if you have a horse that's having a really hard time being focused, what we want to do is first gain their focus, then gain their obedience. So we've got him just kind of loping around. He's still really high-headed. I'm going to ask him to go ahead and stop. I took a firm hold on him to make him really stop. Then I'm going to go ahead and give him a little release of pressure. Now I'm going to ask him to back. Now he's lowering his head really nicely, but he's fighting me a little bit. You see him go kind of back and forth between being really naughty and being good. I'm still going to give him a release at the point where his head is down. He feels really good. And I'm going to ask him for another busy-minded task. So my horse is broke enough to spin around and counter arc. So I'm going to let him do those things. Now he's still not super happy with me. He's still really fighting the commands that I'm asking him to perform, but he's getting through it. So instead of making him be perfect and not be prancy, I'm just asking him to keep his mind busy and to keep moving around. Now it's on these horses. It is summer while we're shooting this video. So on these horses, you are going to see them secrete a lot of sweat. It is a lot of effort for them to be this prancy and this busy-minded while trying to perform these tasks. So instead of just trying to lope a really pretty circle, the thought here is I'm going to make his mind work even more. I'm going to look at a spot on the ground, make all 4 feet track around really nicely. Now I'm going to go over your hand position while we're doing some of these things really quickly. So you see my hand is just right there in an L. I'm not tipped inside like this, because when I tip inside and pull down to my knee, you're going to see this increase in speed. Instead, I want you guys to sit up straight, gain control of your animal, and look to the inside, staying really tall and straight, keeping that arm in an L, looking to the inside. Don't lean forward. Don't drop that hand down like this, because that's going to get this increase of speed and your horse is going to get really strung out. Instead, you're going to take a feel, sit up really tall, have that hand just right there by your side. We're not leaning to the outside. We're not leaning to the inside on this horse. We're just asking him to track around really, really nicely. So now I'm going to ask him to go ahead and lope the other direction. You can see that my outside hand is doing a little bit of work also. Right now it's just keeping his head a little less bent than what he's trying to be. He's trying to really kind of fold in half. That outside hand has just got a little bit of pressure. The outside hand can help you a lot with speed also. It can kind of regulate the tempo that we're going around in this circle. So we're just loping around. And then when I feel him get a little out of control or lift it up like he is here, I'm going to ask for a smaller circle and go around. So this is for your busy-minded horses. And sometimes your hotter horses can benefit from this, but this is a really good way to gain some control, get these horses warmed up really nicely before you do some training, and just ask them to start to focus. Backing is a big part of this, but having that release point where we just give them a pat and go on to the next part of what we're asking them to do.
One other thing to note is you may not want to use a different bridle than your actual competition bridle. Question I get a lot is, do I practice in something different and then run in something else? While that used to be something we used to do a long time ago, I like to have the right feel of my horse before I go make a run. If you see that your horse stays in the correct frame of mind doing these type of drills in the warm-up pin, what I call the sundial, as you go all the way around, I want him to feel that comfortable and that release of tension in the warm-up pin with the bit I'm actually going to compete in. That way, I don't put a bullet in the chamber, per se, by taking that bridle off, changing his state of mind by putting something else on his face. So when I'm doing drills that are a little slower that we'll go over in a lesson in the future, I might use split reins or an O-ring or a D-ring on my horse's face, but I like to stick with my competition bridle here. Remember, I'm always going to lean towards something with a shorter shank that's broken in the middle. I'll go over some bits in a later lesson, but having something that you can actually have your horse start to be really supple in the warm-up pin is going to lead to an overall better run. I hope you guys enjoyed this lesson on warm-up pin etiquette and drills. If you did, make sure to write everything down in your quiz and your worksheet. Get it turned in ASAP so you can move on. I'll see you in the next lesson.